Hey, it's Jason Rogers here, and in this video I want to share with you how I was able to buy a seven-figure business before my 28th birthday, and I want to share with you the macro step-by-step process that I took to do so and how you can potentially do the same. But before we dive into this video, if you're interested in business content, if you're interested in the idea of buying a business and how to structure deals in a way where you don't necessarily need to use your own personal liquidity, then be sure to subscribe to this channel so that we can discuss these types of topics in greater detail. This video is going to be a macro video, but we go deeper and dive deeper in other videos. But anyways, let's get right to it. So first things first, I did not have an MBA. I didn't study business in college. I do have a 4-year degree, but I studied psychology, so not really a relevant topic as it relates to buying a business. I would say the one real piece of experience that was useful for me in being able to successfully buy a seven-figure business at the age of 27 would be the years of experience I had working in my father's small business. He owned a roofing company, and I did various different tasks and performed various different roles in that business, from basic accounting to accounts receivable to some sales, marketing. I learned a good bit about how a business functions by working in his office from about the age of 15 to about the age of 20. He used to work me like a rented mule, made me get up at 6 in the morning and wash trucks. So there was that aspect too of knowing how to work extremely hard that was absolutely relevant, right? But besides that experience of working in my father's business from again about the age of 15 through about the age of 20, I would not say that I had a background that would have really set me on a path to be particularly successful in business. Not that I feel like I've achieved what I want to achieve. I'm about 1% of the way of achieving my personal ambitions, but nevertheless, that was my background. Fast forward about 5 or 8 years into the future, actually around my 26th or 27th birthday, around that time, and I was actually living in Colombia. I was traveling at the time. I was something of an internet entrepreneur. I was making a little bit of money down there. In Colombia, you can live pretty cheaply. I was learning Spanish, and I was enjoying life, and I was really feeling like I needed a new challenge. You know, I had gone to Colombia about 2 years prior, and I'd thrown myself into a world where I didn't know anyone. I didn't know a single person when I showed up in Colombia in like 3,000 miles. I had to learn Spanish when I showed up there. And so that was a crazy rush for me. But after living down there for about 18 months on and off, I was looking for a new challenge. And I was looking to really take my finances more seriously. I was looking to grow my net worth, my wealth, and I really wanted to do big things. And so I actually was looking for different business opportunities, and I stumbled on Dan Panyu, who many of you who are watching this video will know. Many others of you will not know Dan Panyu. Dan Panyu was an individual who built a bunch of wealth basically by buying companies. He was most successful by buying companies in the oil and gas sector with, I believe it was Great Western was his company. And what he did after building considerable wealth by buying companies is over the last 25 or so years, he's taught other individuals how to buy companies as well. I resonated with his business philosophies, and so I ponied up and I flew myself to Guthrie, Scotland, which is where he lives. He literally lives in a castle. And I spent about 8 days, had to pay him pretty well to spend some time with him, and learned his basic principles and his basic premise for how one could go about and buy a business. After spending about 7 or 8 days in Guthrie, Scotland, in November of 2018, I actually flew back to Colombia because that's where I was still living at the time. And I started reaching out, as he had generally advised me to do. I started reaching out to individuals with considerable experience in real estate, in accounting, in law, in finance, and in investment banking. And I probably had about 60 or 70 conversations with individuals, either again in law, real estate, accounting, finance, etc., these different backgrounds that are relevant for being successful in business. I scheduled about 60 or so of these calls with these really high-performing individuals in those different areas. I was actually able to book those calls by sending out probably 2,000 to 5,000 LinkedIn messages, thousands of LinkedIn messages. I'll actually never forget. I was in Colombia on Thanksgiving of 2018, and I was sending out messages like an animal. I was in this little coffee shop down there in Colombia on my Mac right here, just getting after it, sending messages out like an animal, like a madman. And funny enough, actually, I was getting a ton of responses that day. I always imagine after the fact that, there's these successful individuals who are looking at their phones while they're eating turkey with one hand, and they're reading their phone, seeing a message from me and saying, hey, this is kind of interesting, right? Because that was actually one of my best days for sending out those messages. But anyways, I sent out about 2,000 to 4,000 messages, and from that booked about 60 calls. Of those calls, most of them went pretty well. I've been an individual who knows how to speak fairly well, so I believe I was able to communicate my vision for, hey, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to buy businesses in the manufactured housing sector. I pitched these individuals of, hey, this is why I believe it could be so successful. It's recession resistant, it has stable revenues, and this is an underappreciated asset class within real estate. And hey, I want to make these acquisitions in this sector. I know I can do it, but I know I can't do it alone. That's why I'm reaching out to you, because you have experience in accounting or in taxes or in law or in real estate or in what have you. After about 2 to 3 calls with each of these different individuals, generally we came to an agreement. I was able to select the individuals that I wanted to work with most, who wanted to work with me, and I built this team. The long and the short of it, I could go into more detail, and actually I have gone into more detail in other videos on my YouTube channel. So by the way, if you haven't yet, subscribe to my YouTube channel. But I built this team. What I then needed was support with accounting and legal, right? I needed a law firm to help me draft contracts and to draft a PSA, purchase and sale agreement, and to do the things that would be necessary to bring a legal entity to life and to basically make a business transaction take place. And so I reached out to law firms and accounting firms alike. I built relationships with these different professional firms after interviewing about a dozen accounting firms and about a half a dozen law firms. Had all these different interviews with these different firms. I used my board of directors that I had built to help me really ascertain which of these firms might be the best fit, and then built these professional relationships with these external third-party legal and accounting firms respectively. After that took place, and that had probably taken about 60 days now to both build my immediate board of directors and then these relationships with, a top accounting and legal firm, that probably took between 60 and 90 days. And then I went on a deal flow hunt. And what I mean by deal flow, first of all, is I went on a hunt to find individuals who were interested in selling their business in the manufactured housing industry, right? Because again, I started with this premise of I want to buy businesses in the manufactured housing industry. But obviously I needed to find business owners that were perhaps at retirement age or for whatever reason or reasons were willing and open to selling. And I was of course looking to position myself as a buyer. And with the group I had formed, we were going to come in and hopefully buy their company. So I cold called like crazy. And actually, because I had been making YouTube videos, I was receiving inquiries from other interested entrepreneurs who wanted to work alongside me, who wanted to help me find deals. That was one of the perks of actually making videos like this here on my YouTube channel, is there were other individuals who were reaching out to me saying, hey, I'd like to help make cold calls alongside you. We can find deals together, and maybe if you could teach me how you're doing this, and if you could give me a little bit of cut if you're able to do a deal, that would be great. And so I built this little sales team, and myself and these other individuals, we were making calls like crazy. We were calling all across America, especially in the middle states. And after about a month of making tons of calls, we found a good handful, I would say about a dozen to maybe 15, actually probably even more, probably about 20, about 15 to 20 different business owners in the manufactured housing industry that were open to potentially selling. What I then did is I probably spent about 15 to 20 days and probably put about 20,000 miles on different rental cars and drove from site to site, from manufactured housing community to manufactured housing community, meeting all of these different business owners and learning about their different businesses and interacting with them and figuring out what they would be willing to sell their community for, and how much they were looking to sell it for, and if they were open to seller financing or if they wanted all the cash up front. What were they looking for, right? And in meeting all those different business owners, a lot of great things happened. For one, I learned a lot about what strong businesses in my sector look like versus what weaker businesses in my sector look like. And don't get me wrong, I had already been learning like a sponge, right? In having done those initial meetings with the team that I ultimately built, my board, I had learned a lot about this sector because I was speaking with real estate experts and industry experts. And so I knew a basic about the industry. I knew a good bit about the industry already, but when you get on the ground level and you actually see these different businesses, face to face and you talk to the owners, you learn a lot more. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was learning a ton, but obviously I wasn't out there in South Dakota, North Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska. I wasn't out in these different states just for fun. I was there to buy a business. Now, the elephant in the room is that most of these business owners were asking, $800,000, $1.5 million, $2 million, these prices that obviously I didn't have $2 million in my bank account. And so what I needed to do was I needed to come up with either debt or equity. I basically needed a fundraise to consummate a business acquisition. And so after meeting about 15 different business owners, I really found the one business that I felt was the best business, that also seemed to be the most likely candidate, or one of the more likely candidates, I should say. It was more the best business that was also a pretty good candidate, I felt, for a deal to actually take place. And so I'll never forget the day. It was actually on a Zoom call, because I had then at this point gone back to California. I was actually sleeping on my grandmother's couch in spring of 2019. I was sleeping on her couch at this point because I wanted to save my money. I knew that every penny was going to be super important in trying to make this deal happen. So I was sleeping on my grandmother's couch, and I was working with the seller and a business broker. The potential seller of this business had a broker, and that broker set up a Zoom call. I'll never forget this day. I get on the Zoom call. I'm trying to act professional, right? And I had a number. I had done a whole bunch of analysis with my team, and I had a number of, hey, do you know what? This is how much I'm going to offer this business owner. Now, mind you, I didn't have the number, which was a $1.275 million. Actually, I believe I offered 1.25. That's what I offered. I offered 1.25. I didn't have 1.25 million, or really anywhere near that. Definitely nowhere near that in my bank account. But I was believing in myself that I could fundraise debt and equity to make it happen. I didn't know exactly how I'd do this, but I was going for it. So I got on the Zoom call, and I'll never forget what I said. I said, and this was a huge mistake, don't do this. I said, okay, sir, I'm willing to offer you 1 million. What was it? What did I say? 1 million in cash and 250K in seller finance. I think that's what I said. And I'll never forget the mistake I made. I said the 1 million. And then I paused and said, and I'll offer you, I think it was 250K in seller finance, is I think how I said it. The seller of the business only heard the 1 million, and he was asking for 1.4 million. And so I'll never forget when he heard the 1 million, and he had told me ahead of time, hey, don't lowball me, young man. Don't lowball me. And so when I said the 1 million, he felt that was a lowball. And within like 2 minutes of that call, I remember I called in at 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific, I think it was. And at 9:02 a.m., the call was done. I got a call about 5 minutes later from the broker, that seller's broker. He said, hey, what were you trying to say on that damn call, dude? And I said, what do you mean? I was trying to offer him 1.25 million. 1 million in, bank finance or cash that was going to move hands at the time of closing, and then 250K in seller finance for a total of 1.25 million. The business broker said, oh my God, he thought you only offered him 1 million. He was offended. He was insulted because he said, don't lowball me. And then he thought you offered him only 1 million. I said, no, I was in total offering him 1.25. Anyways, long story short, about that next hour and a half, there was these back and forths between me and the broker and the seller, because at the time the seller was a little salty with me for good reason. He thought I had lowballed him. But about an hour later, we agreed on a $1.275 million purchase price. I'll never forget that day. I remember taking a walk around my grandma's neighborhood, because I was living on my damn grandma's couch at the time to save money. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I've negotiated a 7-figure acquisition. All I have to do now is come up with 7 figures. How easy could this be? And of course, I'd never done something like that. But I reached out to all my board members, and I reached out to a couple of confidants, if you will, and got their advice. And at this point, I decided, well, I need to start calling every bank under the sun. And so shortly thereafter, I actually booked an Airbnb in Lincoln, Nebraska, because this deal took place in Nebraska, and Lincoln, Nebraska is one of the big cities out there in Nebraska. I booked an Airbnb in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I was calling every single bank in Nebraska, essentially. Hundreds of banks, every single one of them, pitching the deal. It's got this, it's got that, it's gonna be great. We've got this great team, we've got this great management team. It's gonna be the best deal ever. This is the best thing since sliced bread. I was looking for about $1 million. What the heck? You should be able to do that, right? And it was a challenge. It was fun. It was chaotic. It was intense. At one point, actually, I'll never forget, I woke up one morning still looking for about $1 million to close this deal. And now I'm spending money on Airbnb. I'm not making any paychecks. So I'm stressed out. And I woke up one morning and my voice had just completely fried itself. It was just done. It was gone. I could barely speak. My voice was fried. And I'll never forget, I'm not gonna keep speaking in that voice, but I called one of the banks at the time that was the most likely I felt to do a deal. It was actually a bank that had done a refinance with the prior seller. When he owned that same site, it was with the bank that had actually done a refinance for him. The seller actually said, hey, you should talk to this banker. I've done a refinance for this very property that you're trying to buy before, so definitely talk to him. I called up that banker, and when I was leaving the voice message, my voice was so raspy, I think from all the stress and from all the calling and everything, that my voice was cutting out, and it made me sound like, when I was leaving the voice message, that I was completely lacking confidence. It sounded really bad. And so I'll never forget one of the individuals that had actually initially joined me to kind of help me on the sales team, like I talked about earlier, one of the individuals who found me on YouTube. At this point, he had turned into one of the two real studs that was on my sales team. And he said, hey, I called him, I said, dude, I could barely talk. You wanna help me call banks today? I sound like I'm lacking confidence in the deal. And I was, again, speaking super raspy. My voice was cutting out, kind of like, it didn't sound good. And he said, sure. And sure enough, he was calling for a day in banks, and I was emailing banks. And then, in the next couple of days, we set up a bunch of appointments. I set up most of them, and he helped me set up a couple of appointments as well. And I pitched a ton of these different banks in person, showed up in my suit and tie. Those of you who were following me on Instagram about 6 months ago will remember. By the way, there's a shameless Instagram plug. Follow me on Instagram, because I was sharing at the time the stories of me going from bank to bank and meeting all these different bankers and taking them out to lunch and all this stuff. And it was difficult because they were looking for a guarantee, and my net worth was nowhere near the 7 figures at the time that I needed, obviously, to do this kind of a deal. And they were looking for a guarantee, and they were looking for more cash, and it was tough. There was a period where I really didn't know if the deal was going to get done, and I don't quite know why. I could talk more about it, but the long and the short of it, however, is there were actually 2 banks that were really, despite the fact that it was really tough, there were 2 banks that were really looking like they might come through. The number one bank I was feeling really confident about, it's actually the bank I now have a banking relationship to this day, where we deposit our rents every single month for that first business acquisition we made out there in Nebraska. That bank was looking really promising. I had a great relationship with I think he was the senior VP, I think he's the second in command for the whole bank. We had a really great rapport, in my opinion. And then his bank got audited. And he told me, look, I'm so sorry, but we're not gonna be able to provide you any form of financing for the next 2 or 3 months because we're going through a huge audit. Well, our PSA that we had signed, we only had so long to come up with the money. It's not like we could have just kicked our feet up and bought the business 4 years later. When you sign a PSA, there's a limited amount of time in which you can actually buy that business. I said, crap, that was my best banking option. Oh my gosh. But you do what you gotta do, and I just kept calling other banks and meeting other bankers and pitching the deal, and I was excited about it, and I knew we could make it a success. I was dealing with some rejection. Some of the banks were falling off, but there was another bank that was emerging as a potential candidate. And long story short, I fought and I fought and I fought and I fought, and I was potentially having to bring on another guarantor. I was thinking about giving away a little bit of equity in the subsidiary that was gonna buy this business and bringing on a guarantor to help me get this loan, because me alone as a guarantor wasn't gonna quite be enough, and I'm trying to figure this out, and can we do this, and is the bank gonna go for it? And around this time, when it was looking like I was gonna be able to actually pull off this financing and get the majority of the money to buy this business, as a side note too, I was actually negotiating with different investors, and there were different investors talking to me of, hey, I'm looking to invest $250K, or I'm looking to invest this amount, I'm looking to invest that amount. And obviously I'm just looking to get as much money as I freaking can from any and everywhere possible. And I was actually able to strike some, smaller deals with investors that were gonna help me with a little bit of money to help make sure this thing could hopefully go through, and or they were gonna be there ready to do it if the deal was gonna go through. And then this bank that I'd been working for weeks, the best bank had fallen off, right? They got audited, but another bank emerged, and after weeks and weeks and weeks of negotiating with them, it was looking like they were gonna come with a legitimate term sheet. And finally they did, but they offered me a term sheet where they were only gonna give me a 3-year balloon. A 3-year balloon means I was gonna make debt payments every month. Like if you have a mortgage, you make your payment every month. But after 3 years, at the end of the 3rd year, I was gonna need to come up with the remainder of like almost $1 million in cash, just like that. And for commercial loans, it's typical to have a balloon payment, but a 3-year balloon payment barely allows you to really get your feet into the deal. And then immediately you're already looking to either refinance or sell. So I was really uncomfortable with a balloon payment. And right around that time, the seller, who I was building a good rapport with, I think he saw the hunger in me, and for whatever reason or reasons, and I actually have a good relationship with him now, and I know some things now that I won't really share here on video, but he basically said to me, look, I'm gonna offer you this. And he offered me a seller financing package. And he'd actually offered a different seller financing package, but he was only gonna offer like 10 or 15% of the capital stack initially. Actually, I think it was 19%. But I was gonna need to come up with the majority, right? Over 80%. Well, then towards the end now, and by now it's July, I think it's late July of 2019. And he said, you know what? I'm gonna offer you this. And it was over $1 million in financing. It was the majority of the purchase price. I'm gonna finance you. It ultimately turned out to be about 85%, a little over 85% of the total purchase price. Over $1 million to do this deal. And we went back and forth a little bit. There were some different things we had to work out. And ultimately, I said yes. The other bank that had finally come correct after months of negotiating, they had a 3-year balloon. The seller offered me a longer term that I was a lot more comfortable with. The interest rate I felt was very reasonable. And on August 9th of 2019, we closed the deal. And then that business broker and the seller, that business broker initially had hated me. I showed up in a suit and tie the first time ever, and he was out from Nebraska, and he just thought I was a slick little sleazy salesman type. But the business broker and the seller and the individual from the title company and myself went into a little dive bar in Nebraska, and we got a couple of beers. And I'll never forget that day. It was a pretty awesome day. I'll never forget showing up, driving to close, to the closing table. And I was almost like, is this really happening? Am I really pulling this off? And when it signed, it took me a couple of days for me to almost process that this had truly happened. And it's been probably the most crazy period of my life. It certainly has set me on a new financial pathway. I really believe that it'll probably set me up on a whole new direction. Just a year before I was goofing around, dating, having fun in Colombia, really not taking life that seriously, and to a year later have made a 7-figure acquisition before my 28th birthday. It was really cool. And now it's in large part inspired me to continue making videos like this to try to help other acquisitions entrepreneurs do the same kind of thing I did, to make a 7-figure acquisition and to kind of go against the odds and really put themselves on a new financial path in their life. Now, as we go into 2020 now, the company I founded, Brighter Living, which I'm the majority principal owner of, we're looking to do bigger deals. And, we're looking to be smart about it, but we're looking to be aggressive. And we're looking to partner with bigger investors and do other opportunity, look for other deals and other opportunities. And it's awesome. Again, it's all based on that first 7-figure deal I was able to do. And I guess that's how I did it. So look, I'll leave you with this. First of all, thank you for listening to my story and watching this video. I really appreciate your attention. I would say to you that if you're interested in this idea of how to buy a business using largely other people's money, almost all of that deal was, the vast majority of that deal used other people's money. It's very possible for you to do the same. I definitely spent some money to get the thing done. It's not like, as I talk about here on the YouTube channel, it's not like you should have $20 to your name and you can just go out and buy a 7-figure business. No, but you really don't need to be worth $1 million or anywhere near that to make an acquisition like this. But it is, of course, a very intense process, and it's certainly not for everyone. But if you're interested in potentially doing something like what I was able to do, I implore you to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on the notifications. And if you've liked this video, I would love it if you would thumbs it up. It really helps me keep making videos like this, and it helps the channel grow, and it really helps me out. Also, check me out on Instagram. I do a bunch of behind the scenes video and content and different stories on my Instagram, so you can check it out. I'll put the thing right here. And with that, lastly, share in the comments. What would you like me to talk about in future videos, and what have been your takeaways from this one? Again, share in the comments. I'll read all your comments, and I'll respond to as many of you as I can. And again, I really appreciate it, and I'm out.